Want to drive faster? Listen in as Kinch Rendell, an SCCA National Trophy winner and multi-time Pro Solo champion himself, interviews the best autocrossers in the land. He talks fast and drives even faster. And now here's your host, Kinch Rendell.
Hello, this week's guest has 6 solo national championships. Just got that 6th this year in 2017. He also has 5 pro solo championships. And I don't think I asked him, but I bet he races 3 or 4 times a year. I know he came out to Denver this year and got a test and tune in. I don't remember if there was an event that weekend as well. But he's that good. Somebody I've always looked up to, followed around a lot back in the day when he lived here locally. This is none other than David Fouth. If you've been listening, you got to hear his little tutorial type, little mindset talk when it comes to nationals, different things he would do from the mental side as well as physically walking the course. So definitely check out that episode. This one gets into his history along with, what did I call it? Something like golden nugget alert. What he said, I probably said it 3 or 4 times. He basically dropped some things that really made sense to me as in very valuable. And that's what listening to all these guests, you're going to find different things that you can latch onto. When it comes to what his breakthrough was for him, maybe some of you can relate to that. And also, we're going to have a poll that should be online. I'm not sure how long I can leave it online. But at the end of the show, I asked him, taking this from another podcast, do you have any questions for the audience? And he's going to ask, he's like, yeah, you know what? I think we should ask, how much do people believe the tight line is really important, like that it's important? So check out, I'll have that linked off of facebook.com. And you can answer that, chime in. We're going to rate that along with, like, let's say your trophies and or championships. We're going to try to get a scale of the people that think it's really important versus how they perform. So I can't even say enough about David once again. Followed him around, learned a ton from him, and realized I also learned by having him get in my car and going, what the heck is he doing with that steering wheel? And that's where I've learned from so many people, by either having them in my car or getting in their car and watching them. So if you can do that, or watch the videos of people online and see what you can glean from that. Maybe you learn that way. Maybe you don't currently, but you could. That's definitely something I have learned a lot over the years, is watching people, maybe even more so than talking to them, just copying what they are doing, and then later on asking, why are you doing that? Like, what benefit is that giving you and hopefully me, since I'm copying you? So once again, this is David Fouth. Enjoy it. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. You are now this is your second show, really. You've already been here.
Well, yeah, the first one was a little unexpected. I didn't know you were going to have a microphone with you when I did the Nationals talk at the RM Solo Test and Tune, but worked out well.
I do appreciate that, and other people have also told me how much they appreciate that. I mean, myself, I definitely this year walked the second course first a couple times. Just like you said, that way I'd have a clue if somebody talked about it, and it was so much easier the second day. So, oh, and congrats on that latest championship there.
Thank you. It all finally came together for Barry and I with his car. He did a phenomenal job setting up the car, and it just finally came together for us. We were awfully close in 2012 on the maiden year for the car, we're taking second and third, and moments of brilliance, but finally came together for us. So
yeah, so you've ended up in C-Mod. Take us back to when you started.
So that's all the way back in '93, when I was a freshman in college. I had a friend, Mike Becker, who actually co-drove with me in 2000 for my first championship, which was nice for him to be there for that. In '93, I had an '86 Acura Integra. So my friend Mike had heard about SCCA autocross. I had no idea what it was. All I knew was I was a car guy for as long as I could remember. And he took his, I think it was an '83 VW Rabbit out to a race and told me about it. And I thought, well, you know, it sounds kind of far-fetched to be able to actually go race my car, but you know, I'll give it a try. And I came out to an event. It was at Bandimere Speedway in Morrison, Colorado, which is a drag strip for those not from the area. And we raced, set up a course on the overflow parking lots, and I tried it once, and I think afterwards I told my parents about it and said, I'm hooked for life. And, well, apparently I was right.
What do you remember about that first event?
I don't know. I remember some things from my first year. I don't know that I remember that much about that event, other than there was a couple folks that had other Hondas. George and Carolyn Kunis were local folks back then, and they had a Honda Prelude SI, and someone pointed me their way to ask about what I should do, and I remember they recommended raising my tire pressures up to, I want to say somewhere in like the 40-pound range. And of course, off the top of my head, I was thinking, that's crazy, you're going to explode your tires. But, as we all know, that have done autocross for any time, that's not a crazy tire pressure to be running. So they helped me out running those different tire pressures. I had a blast. I'm sure I was one of the slowest cars on course. It was E-stock at the time, the 86 Integras back then, and I just remember it was a lot of fun, and I decided right then that I was going to, on my college student funds, figure out a way to go out as often as possible.
Yeah, so the hook was you were into cars, and it was just adrenaline, or that's what I'm really wondering. What hooked you right away? Just the atmosphere, a little pieces of all of it, or anything specific that first year?
I think it was the opportunity to drive quickly and not risk getting arrested. I, like most teenagers, so let's see, I was 19 at the time, as most or a lot of teenage guys do, they go drive like idiots on the street. And I did that some, and I was nowhere near as bad as a lot of people I knew, but I did my fair share of unwise things on the street. And so finally getting to go out and do even wilder things in the car, but in a fashion that I wasn't doing anything illegal. It was just awesome.
And that's where I hope people take it to heart. Anybody younger, I wish I would have been introduced that young, because what you can do in autocross, I'd hope most people realize, why even try to drive somewhat fast on the street? It just doesn't compare.
Absolutely, and it made a huge difference to how I drove on the street. It's not that I never sped again on the street, but I just didn't have the desire to do that, because it was the rush of what you could do with the car on the street. It wasn't the same as what you could get in autocross without being just insanely stupid and dangerous. So, if you can get that thrill on the autocross course and get the skills to make you a better driver on the street, I know I've avoided many accidents on the street because of what I learned through autocross. So it was a win-win.
Yeah, no kidding. So after the 86 Integra, take us down this path.
Well, so I drove that. So let's see, probably within a few events, I realized that the all-season tires I had on the street weren't very good. So I went and got some used VW wheels, which I found out later were 14 by 6s, and my stock wheels were 14 by 5.5s. So I was technically illegal. I just didn't really realize it until later. But just got some used all-season tires that didn't have much tread on them, which, of course, not much tread means super high performance back then. So I drove that for a bit, and that first year won the RM Solo Rookie of the Year award. Not necessarily for being that high in points, but I made some pretty good improvements along the way. And in fact, I, at least for the longest time, and I don't know if that record still holds, I am the only person to have gotten protested at an RM Solo event, at a local RM Solo event, officially protested for being illegal. And funny enough, I was protested by someone who was a friend before, and I ended up being a friend with that person afterwards. And yep, I was illegal. I had, before I started racing, I had put some stiffer springs on the rear of that car, and the front was torsion bars, so you just had to adjust your torsion bars to match the ride height in the front. But I had some springs that I think lowered the rear of the car like 3/4 of an inch, something like that. And I'm on, very worn, used street tires when everyone else is on Yokohama A008s were the tire of choice at that time. And I went out and I beat someone, one of the local primary competitors. I beat him with my street tires, and he protested me. I was wrong. I readily admitted it. And actually, the week before, we had gotten onto the conversation. I had told him about the springs, and they told me they were illegal. I didn't have time while going to school to swap those springs off before the next event. So, I was determined to be illegal, and then I quickly went and got my stock springs put back on,
and won again.
And then I beat him at the next event.
Exactly. So
it was all good. I learned a lesson. I didn't want to win by cheating. So I ran that car on the street tires for that year. The following year, I finally got. So I think it was the first year that the BF Goodrich R1s had come out. So I got a set of BF Goodrich R1s, and I to be honest, I don't remember whether I won the local E-Stock class the next year or if I came in second. There's a local guy who was local at the time, left for a while, and then has come back for RM Solo recently. Jim Clark, he was my arch nemesis. He had a Honda Civic at the time. I'm sure he probably remembers better than I do how that ended up. But so I raced my Integra for 2 years. So that would be 93, 94. Then in 95, I got, at least I think it was 95, I got a 90 Honda Civic Si and drove that for a couple years. Had great success locally. Limited success on the national level. I did get my first national level trophy in that car, I believe.
Is that the first time you traveled? Was with that car, or did you travel before that?
No, that was the first. No, I'm sorry. I drove. See, I'm getting my timeline all wrong here. I drove my Integra 93, 94, and 95 because I actually went to. So I trophied at the Denver National Tour in my Integra, my 86 Integra. Took fourth place behind several hot shoes that came from out of town who were several seconds ahead of us. And in 95, I went to my first national championship. And I think 95, I think that might have been the 25th Solo Nationals. And that was at Topeka at Forbes Field. And I went there with delusions of grandeur that I'd be up, maybe I'd get a trophy, since I'd trophied at the national tour. And I think I might have come in about halfway, maybe just below halfway. It was very eye-opening. And like most people, I blamed the car. It's the easiest excuse, and it was very eye-opening. And it was after I had that experience, and being convinced in my mind that it was the car, that I then figured out a way to, while still in college, get rid of that car and buy a 90 Honda Civic Si, which was not the SI to have. The 89 was the car to have because it was a bit lighter, I think like 70 pounds lighter. But it was going to be the car I was going to do great in. And I started doing some traveling with, well, actually I think I just did the national tour, Denver National Tour again, and took fourth place again, trophied. Went to nationals, and again was not much higher than mid-pack, as best I remember. So it was another eye-opening experience, that second nationals in '96.
Wow. So I would assume that, since I joined so much later, I guess 2001 I came in and started racing, you were so fast by then. I didn't even know you ever had a Civic. I just knew you're in a Type R Integra and you keep walloping everybody. That's where I'm like, how fast are some of these people when they first begin? So that's interesting that you got in the Civic, and when you don't do well the second year, I can relate to that totally in the Audi S4 I kept taking to nationals. What was next? Because at some point, doesn't Bob Tennell move here? You gave him some credit at one point.
Absolutely, and I give a lot of credit to Bob. He was a great mentor to me. He moved to Colorado, I want to say the end of '94, so I was still driving my 86 Integra at that point. And I remember there was an event that I think I won E-Stock locally, and I asked Bob during fun runs, hey, Bob, would you drive my car? And thinking, okay, yeah, maybe Bob will be a little faster than me, but I'll show that I'm really good. And Bob went out, and very first run in my car, having never driven it before, I want to say he was a second and a half faster than me. And I think, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. So I went out and I drove the car with Bob in the car. And he gave me a couple suggestions. Like I remember one point he said, well, when you're coming out of this corner, you're accelerating and you're just holding the car in too tight and scrubbing off some speed. So unwind the wheel a little bit. But one of the most frustrating things that he told me after that was, I don't really have a whole lot to tell you. You're doing all these things really well. Just do them a little faster. And that's the most frustrating thing when you're trying to give advice to someone who's trying to find that last second or whatever, is when you can't identify any large mistakes. So it was a little frustrating to hear that from Bob, and it was encouraging too that I'm not making any big mistakes, but it was very frustrating because, well, how do I do that just a little faster? Because you get to that point where all you need to do is do every one of those corners a tenth of a second faster, and you're going to be right up with those national champions. But how do you do that a tenth of a second faster? And I didn't have that epiphany at that point. I didn't immediately start going faster because Bob told me that I just need to do those things a little faster. So I got the Civic, and was just making incremental improvements. Great success locally, discouraging results nationally. Around that time, well, then I borrowed a couple Dodge Neons at the time. I did well at a pro in California in a borrowed Dodge Neon. Guy who used to run locally, Dave Eslick. He, good friend of mine, and he let me borrow his Neon, and I had some success out there. I think I took second or third at a pro solo. So, okay, yeah, that went well. But I still had my Civic and was trying things and only having limited success. I graduated. Well, I also borrowed a Dodge Neon at Nationals, thinking that I was going to be right up in the trophies, and was well out of the trophies again. Then I graduated from college and decided, all right, so I've got a job. I'm finally going to close out this question of, is it me or is it the car? So I'm going to buy the car that everybody's winning with, and I'm going to put on a setup on that car that everybody's winning with. So a month after I graduated and started a new job, so I guess this would be January of '98, I bought a two-door Dodge Neon ACR, and the hot setup was pretty well known. Mark Daddio was running the setup at the time. He had particular valving of the shocks that he'd worked with Coney to get, and I think something with the front bar, a particular front bar as well, and decided, okay, well, bought that car, put on the Daddio setup, if you will, and decided, all right, I'm going to go out and it's either me or it's the car, and I'm going to prove it. So I ran a test and tune just to get used to the car and get the setup, and then I ran a local event, and surprise of all surprises to me and everybody else, I took 1,000 points at the event. I don't think I'd gotten higher than 965 or 970 before in my life. And I took 1,000 points, and 999 points was Kevin Bailey. Kevin and Kay Bailey were running MR2s back then, I think an MR2 Turbo in A stock. And I took 1,000, and Kevin, who was a perennial 1,000-point winner at that time, was 999. I was shocked and obviously very pleased with my purchase. So then I went to a second event, and I took 1,000 points again, and Kevin was 999 right behind me. So I was feeling pretty good about myself, and feeling pretty confident, and obviously I'd figured something out. I was feeling validated that, all right, I'm not a hack. It's not just, it's not me all the time. It was the car, but I was clicking with the car. And then I went to my first Pro Solo with the car, which happened to be the Wendover Pro Solo. And a couple of the top Neon drivers were there, Nick Leverone and Stacy Molliker in their Neon ACRs. And somehow, after the first day, after the first two sessions, I was in third place, I think about 30 thousandths of a second out of first place. And these were against top national Neon drivers. And I was blown away. I was felt a little surreal. And then the next morning, go out, and I think I dropped maybe 1/10 of a second total between the two sides, and Nick and Stacy did not improve, and I won my first national event, which was very surreal. It was a goal I'd always wanted to have, but just never thought it was going to happen. And I'll mention one funny story at that event. Eric Strelniks, I think, was driving a Corvette. I forget whether it was Corvette or his RX-7, and I went up against him in the challenge. And before we got in the challenge, I made some joke about we were making some joke about maybe throwing it around to the other person, and Eric said, "Oh yeah, I'll give you a $100 chip from the casino if you throw the round." Okay, haha, it's just a joke. Go up, and I remember the course was you'd go first, second, third before you even really got into some good turns. So it was a very fast course. I went out on my first run, hit third gear, turned in for the corner. The back end with the cold rear tires just snapped on me, and I looked out my passenger side window and saw cones hitting the passenger side doors. I'm in a full up spin at about 70 miles an hour. Obviously, that wasn't a great time for the first side of the challenge. I go up to the other side of the challenge, and I yell over to Eric, "I spun, where's my $100 chip?" And while we're sitting at the lights, he's reaching down trying to get the chip out of his pocket as I take off from the lights. He never gave me that $100 chip, though, so I should probably talk to him about
plus
that.
Plus a little interest.
Yeah. So that's I had some good success to start with the Neon, and then I went into a bit of a lull, or a slump, if you will, because I dropped back into the 975, 980 range at the local events, and it was a little bit of a head scratcher. I mean, in hindsight, looking back, I probably got a little overconfident, and maybe didn't put in the effort in either setup or concentrating on the course walks in order to get those results that I had right out of the box. But went to nationals that year, just hoping. My goal was maybe I'll get a trophy this year, and somehow after the first day, and this was back in the time when there was tons of Neons running, and I think there was probably 14 trophies, something like that. After the first day, I found myself, I think, in 5th place, which was quite a shock for me. And then somehow on the second day, put in some good runs and ended up 3rd place, just 1,000th of a, to show you how tight things were back then, just 1,000th of a second ahead of 4th place, and I think like another 14 thousandths ahead of 5th place. But I ended up taking 3rd place behind Mark Daddio, I believe, won, and Nick Leverone was in 2nd place. So I finally achieved my my goal of trophying at nationals. So that was some great success with that car. The next year, I continued to have some success with the car, ups and downs, trophies at several national events, and then at nationals, I think I did pretty well the first day, but then the second day I had cone troubles and had to put in a clean run on the 3rd day, and that dropped me down to 6th place. So I trophied both of those years with the Neon. So that was a great thing for the car. It did what I had hoped to do, and then I did sell that car after those 2 years. Because by chance, my dream car, my dream daily driver car, which was an Integra Type R, I actually had that when I was campaigning the Neon the second year in '99, but I was daily driving the Type R. I decided, let's go ahead and race the Type R. So that was the next car that I went to.
And one thing I want to point out to people is you finally got in a car that was competitive. You knew it was competitive because other people were racing it. You got the setup, just like I got the setup advice for the Type R from you. That was huge. Do you think anything else ever clicked? Because the advice Bob gave you about opening the wheel, Robert Thorne rode with me a number of years ago. His only advice for the whole thing was, did you hear the engine right there? You could have opened the wheel a little bit more. I'm like, what? The same funny advice. And it reminds me that John Ames also said, the difference is that little 1/10 of a second or several hundredths in every turn. As many turns as we had, it really adds up. So did anything click for you, or just maybe getting in the better platform car helped you?
So, yeah, something did click. And I think everybody that goes from there, I'm pretty quick locally and makes that jump up to the national level. Some people, it just comes all together very easily and they just do it. But I think a lot of people, they've got those plateaus. And I think the plateau for me, and the thing that got me over that level, was thinking about the friction circle. And how can I be on the edge of the friction circle everywhere? And I think I mentioned a little bit in the Nationals talk, but for me, it was an epiphany, because all of a sudden I'm not, okay, well now I'm braking and now I'm turning. I'm braking and I'm transitioning to turning, because I got to make sure that I stay on the outside of that transition circle. If I'm looking at the point of what the car's doing, if you look at data traces, you see the point of what the car's doing bouncing all around. I don't want any points filling in the inside of that friction circle. Anytime I spend on those points on the inside of the friction circle is wasted time. So I want to spend all of my time transitioning around and traversing that edge of that friction circle. If you were in the room right now, you could see my finger kind of walking along the edge of a friction circle. I want to be on that outside edge. I want to be transitioned from braking and flowing smoothly over to full turning and flowing then smoothly over to full acceleration. And something about thinking about that transition and staying on that edge, a light bulb came on and I suddenly got faster. And that was, for me, how I got that tenth of a second per corner. That transitioned me from, 970 points locally to competing right at the top of the class. And I don't always, obviously no one's ever always successful at it, but that's something that I think about often is how can I stay at that edge? How can I do my weight transfer of the car to make sure that the car's always doing the most that it can do in whatever situation? And, part of that also is, I'm a big believer in doing a tight line and being very precise and tidy, but, we never always hit the line we want to be at. So the important thing, though, is to make sure no matter what line you're on, yes, obviously you want to be on the good line that is the fastest one, but whatever line you're on, use everything the car has. And that was my epiphany that transitioned my competitiveness, I think.
No, I love that. I phrase that kind of differently, but basically he who's on the best or closest, tightest line, but at the edge of grip, so at the edge of the friction circle, is probably going to win within reason.
Exactly. And if you can both of those together, you're going to have a good chance of winning.
Yeah, and hopefully I just started this to make a video of the friction circle, because what I'm seeing in my mind is I'm braking really hard, so the little dot goes, I want to say, forward, and then I want to keep it on that edge of the circle going from, let's say, 12 o'clock, 11, 10, 9 if I'm turning to the right. So you're going to blend that just enough with the braking into turning to keep it on the edge, not to come back in and separate the braking from the turning, is how I'm picturing that your plot should be really dark all around the edges.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yes, great way to describe it.
I've seen enough on, back in the day, what was it, the TrackMate, to get exactly that. You could really see where people they would fill in more of the middle because they weren't always doing something. And that makes me always think, especially after riding with people at a test event a while back. You were, the same one I think you were at. People would go and drive straight for a little bit and then turn really hard. I was like, no, always be arcing around it to get ready for that, which once again, the friction circle would be applying something outside of the middle section of just going straight or just accelerating straight. So I'll start that so people hopefully can at some point see a picture of that. So you got to the 1998 Type R Integra. You picked that up as a daily driver, and now you're going to campaign it. And pretty soon here, I come in the picture and see you blazingly fast in it.
Well, and that car, that was my dream car, my attainable dream car. And so when I started driving that, it was just awesome because it did so many things so well. And the Neons really were a good handling car. They did a lot of things well, but the Type R just was entirely that next level. And I wanted to drive it, but then I found that it's working pretty well too. And I had some success. I was up there in the trophies at the Pro Solos I was doing. It was going pretty well, but I wasn't winning with the car. I was getting seconds, thirds, fourths at the various Pro Solos. I probably did 3 or 4 Pro Solos that year within a couple national tours. But I had high hopes, and my dream, probably ever since I had started autocrossing, was, and it was kind of that far-off dream that, you got to have a goal. I don't know if I'll ever actually be able to attain it because, oh my goodness, have you seen the guys who have attained this? winning a national championship. That's amazing. So that was always my far-fetched goal. So I looked to it, but I don't think I ever was really thinking, well, yeah, I'll do that. No, it's more, okay, I want to be up there competitive with the top of the trophies and just see what I can do. And so I went to Nationals, went to the Pro Solo finale, and I think I took fourth or something like that. And what happened, what was interesting was Kevin McCormick, who was fast all year in his Type R, at the Pro finale, I want to say Saturday afternoon, he's at the line, and you hear his revs up, and you hear him drop the clutch, and then you just hear this clanking noise, and the car lurched a little bit and stopped. And his transaxle just completely grenaded. So I was one of the only other drivers in the class who didn't have a co-driver, and so I offered my car up to Kevin to finish out the Pro, because he was competing to win the year end. And he went out and he won the event in my car, which validated that I had a pretty good setup on the car. Wasn't particularly fond of the fact that he beat me in my own car, but good on him. He drove well, and he won the Pro Solo Class Championship that year. I did have a co-driver already for the Solo Nationals, so I wasn't going to be able to offer the car to him for Solo Nationals, but he was able to find someone else's car for the first day while he was getting a transmission flown in to fix his car. So Solo Nationals comes, and we all had a bit of a shock. A ringer, if you will, was coming into the class. That's how all the scuttlebutt around the pits or around the paddock was. Neil Sapp, who longtime, very successful autocrosser, who had actually gone over and was racing professionally in the World Challenge, I believe in BMW 3 Series at the time, maybe even for Turner Motorsport, I think. But he was a big name. I was watching him race on TV, and all of a sudden find out that he's coming and going to drive Pete Motah's BMW 325, a 95 BMW 325. He was going to come in and, that was throwing a monkey wrench in everybody's plans for trying to win Solo Nationals. So, very intimidating name that was coming into drive, because I'm pretty sure Neil had won multiple Solo National Championships before, so it was pretty intimidating. So we go out the first day of Solo Nationals, and I drove well. I actually don't remember that much about the first day that year, other than, lo and behold, I think I was in second place, and to be honest, I don't remember whether it was Neil. I think it was Neil leading. He was ahead of me by a tenth or something like that, and then another guy, and I forget his name, but I remember he was driving a V6 Camaro, which no one saw as being a car for the class, but it was a very sweeper-intensive course, and he had big tires compared to what we had on the Type R and the BMW, and he was right up in it. So I was just thrilled. I was within a tenth of a second of the lead, and then the nerves hit. And I remember walking the course for the second day and thinking, oh my gosh, I've never been this close. Could I actually win? And I was sick to my stomach. I mean, I've never had nerves quite that bad. And I remember actually calling my dad the morning before we ran the second day, and just telling him I I don't know how to handle all this. And he said, just go out and do your best. Let the chips fall where they may, but just concentrate and go out and do your best. So he was very helpful. He helped calm my nerves a bit, and I felt I had a really good plan for the first run. And I remember going out on my first run, and there was a lot of fast drivers in the class. I went out, came back on my first run, and I think I had over a second on the rest of the class on that first run. I was shocked. I'm like, well, okay, wow, that felt like a pretty good run. I didn't think it was that spectacular. And then I go out on my second run, and I think I went a couple tenths slower, and everyone else is dropping time. So I'm in first place at this point, and thinking, okay, well, I threw that second run away. Now everyone's catching up. And then I go out on my third run, and I think I got within a tenth of my first run time. So I'm just shocked at myself that I'm sitting on my very first time. I never sat on my first time. You always get a little bit of an improvement, and especially at nationals, you're supposed to go faster on each run. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I've thrown it away. But then, looking at everybody else's times, no one's catching that time, that first run time. And Neil Sapp in the BMW was I think he was the highest number car, so he was the last car out on course. And I ran a pretty low number. I was number 119 at the time, and Neil was like 196 or something. So I got to get out of my car, I'd go up and watch, and I'm seeing the times of these second drivers come across, and I don't even know that I actually ended up with the fastest time that day, but no one who was up near the top was turning a faster time. I think Kevin McCormick might have actually beat me on that course, but he was far enough back on the first day that he was behind me. And I remember watching Neil go out, and he hit a cone about a third of the way into the run. And, we're all watching, and he comes across, and he had a quick time, but it wasn't fast enough. And, then all of a sudden the realization that I just won kind of came flooding over the top of me, and I got weak in the knees, and I actually had to kneel down because I thought I was going to faint or something. It was quite a feeling of elation and joy to have achieved what I didn't think I was ever going to be able to do. And it was quite the experience to finally get that and get to experience that. I guess I'm a little bit at a loss for words for really how to describe that.
No kidding. And you touched on this in the lead up to nationals, the mental side. Basically, having your dad as a sounding board and getting advice was probably huge to help you reframe how to look at that. For me, I remember one nationals, something came over me too, and I was like, act like I had never done it before. Maybe in one of the years I led after the first day or whatever. It's like, whoa, second day, here it comes. What's going on? So there's so much, I believe, mental in this sport. Once you get pretty quick, it's really mental. Can you put down the runs? And also, is your car up to par? Have you put the time in on the setup, et cetera?
I agree completely.
Very interesting. So that was the first out of 6 championships now. Do you have any other mental thoughts? Let's go with mental thoughts first. Anything else that you recommend that you can think back to that? Or subsequent times that you were successful?
That's a good question. I mentioned this some in the Nationals talk when I drove with Ian Mannix in 2009 when I had a big lead on the first day. I fell victim, I almost fell victim to the driving to protect the lead or driving cautiously. and I know I've done that other times too, whether it's not necessarily to protect the win, but protect even your position in the trophy, because you don't want to fall out of the trophies. And it's such an easy mistake to do that you just have to focus, I think, on the fact that it's not going to be the way you want to win. It's not going to be the way you want to settle for what you did. It's not the way that you got to where you are, and you didn't get success by being cautious. You got success by driving aggressively and precisely. So every time I do that and I drive cautiously, I just have to kick myself for forgetting the lessons that I've learned that were kind of painful. And what I found interesting this year, being able to go out and execute and win this year, I think that giving that national stock and having Clay Turner ask me if I'd put together that short presentation for the Test and Tune, that was really helpful for me as well. And I'm thrilled that people found some value in it, and maybe picked up little tidbits here and there that might have helped them. But it helped me just as much as it helped anyone else, because it made me examine and think through more. When did I have this success? What did I do when I had this success? And what did I do when I failed? And some of the things that I advised in the national talk, I had to remind myself, particularly the what do you do when you've got the lead the first day, because I had a decent lead after the first day this year, and I'll tell you, the thoughts were going through my head. It was an agonizing night that I had trouble falling asleep this year after the first day, of just trying to get myself out of that mental cycle of, okay, well, you got to make sure you're clean.
Yeah, be safe.
But then you might drive conservatively, and, well, no, I want to actually drive aggressively, and just, I mean, it was very good that I had actually gone through those thoughts and through that mental decision-making of, no, that's not the way I'm going to do it. That's not the way I'm going to handle it. I'm not going to go out and protect the lead. I'm going to go out and see if I can extend my lead. And, I mean, thankfully it worked out. There were some very fast drivers. I wasn't the fastest on the second day. Ben Martinez got me by a couple tenths, and but I went out and I did try to go my fastest. If I didn't have a lead, could I have gone a little faster? I don't know. Maybe. I don't think anyone puts together a perfect run. And I'm sure over the winter I'm going to be examining the data and finding places where Barry was faster than me in the same car on that second course, and I'll try and improve.
And something you said reminds me, one of the days, or nationals, that I was leading after the first day and ended up losing, I usually drive home, and I'm sitting there thinking the whole time, like, what was wrong, what did I do, how could this happen, what happened? I could not figure it out until Alex Mearson, I think, who had beat me the year before after leading the first day, he goes, hey, you just weren't driving hard the second day. And that reminds me, when you were saying that, you almost need to have a game plan, like you're saying, and go out there, I'm going to attack this course. Because I had no clue. I'm like, what happened? How did you not drive fast? Like, I wasn't even proud of how I drove. But I couldn't put my finger on what was lacking. And then hearing somebody else say, hey, you just weren't attacking. It put it together. So obviously I didn't have the right mental game plan going in. Something, like you're saying, shifted overnight, like, oh, I'm in the lead. Oh, okay. Yeah, be safe, be clean or something. Oh, which reminds me, let's see what you remember from this. So you've been our overall local champion. And then one year, they gave you a reward for something when I don't think you were quite the overall champion. Do you remember what that was?
Huh.
Involved a cone or lack of cones?
I had completely forgotten about that. Didn't I have 0 cones over the entire season?
Yep.
Do you remember what year that was?
I don't. I've been looking at the results right here the whole time, because you were overall in 2001. I thought the joke was, well, maybe if you would have been a little bit closer to those cones, you would have. I think you were also once again gunning for the overall championship here. And they figured out that you didn't have a cone the whole time. Now, I'll bet you touched a lot of cones that year, but that's something just amazing, so I wanted to bring that up, that you completed a local autocross season with no cones.
I had forgotten that. And I bet it was in the Type R. I bet it was in 2001. Because 2001 was, for lack of a better term, kind of a magical season of me really syncing with a car. I remember being able to what felt like just dance the Type R. It felt like an extension of me that I could get it to do whatever I wanted it to do. And I remember, like at the Wendover Pro Solo that year, there was the far end turnaround that we'd come out, and somehow through the combination of trail braking and the attitude I had with the car and where it was in the rev bands, I was powering out of that in turnaround in second gear and getting power on oversteer. The back end was drifting out as I was full on the throttle, and it was just great. And I remember a Coors Field event, which for people who aren't local to Colorado, Coors Field, most of the courses were very transition and slalom intensive because it was a long, narrow lot, and so you couldn't do big sweeping corners except for a turnaround at the end. So you had a lot of slaloms and back and forth transitions. And I remember coming through a slalom towards the finish, probably like 5-cone slalom, and I remember barreling in there near the top of second gear, slamming on the brakes, back end is dancing, and the back end is just it's pivoting around the front, and it's just dancing back and forth through each cone and perfectly through the finish, and it felt great. And I remember Bob Tunnell came up to me afterwards and he said, "That was a championship run right there." And I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about myself, so okay, that gives me some confidence. I wonder if I can do that faster. And I think I went out the next run and dropped like another half second. And it was just one of those things where I was very much in lockstep and in sync with what the car was doing. The setup was great. The tires we were on that year, I know in 2000 I was running Kumho's. It was the V700, I think, at the time. And then I think it was like the the AS05 or something like that, whatever the Hoosier was of that year. I was driving on the Hoosier, and just the combination of that tire and that car was kind of magical in my memory of really being in sync with a car.
Yeah, and that's when I came in and just remembered, oh, I can drive this Audi, and I can beat these guys. No way. I mean, I wasn't experienced enough being a newbie. And then quickly after that, I finally said, hey, I got to buy a car that's competitive. I remember talking to you.
Yeah, that wasn't the best car for the class.
Hey, up here at altitude, it seemed okay, but every year I'd go to Nationals and get stomped. And then I remember talking to you, and it was probably Kevin Youngers debating, or maybe it was Bob debating, and it was they have to replace clutches. And with the Type R, you're like, no, nothing has to happen here. So that was the decision for me. I'm like, all right, I should be a Honda fanboy anyway, right? So I jumped in there.
Yeah.
So how many events were you making all throughout this time? Any classes, co-driving? Like, it seems like you made quite a few events and then you started traveling. You said you did 4 pro solos at one point in 1 year back in the day.
Oh, yeah, from when I got the Neon, so starting in 98. I'd done probably 2 pro solos a year when I had my Civic Si in 96 and 97. But starting in 98, I went to at least 3 pros each year, and all the local events. I was single, I had nothing better to do. And so I was probably going to 12 local events, at least 4 national events and nationals, probably more like 15 local events if you included winter events as well. I was just driving. It was what I enjoyed doing, and I was driving every moment I could. That continued that sort of pace through 2003 at least, when I met my wife Tammy, and we got married. And actually, 2003, that was a tough one because as it worked out, I could only do a limited number of local events, and my average points were super high, but I had to sit on one rain event where I didn't have rain tires, and someone did have rain tires and set the index really harsh. So I was sitting on like a 965 point event. All of my other events were 995 and higher. But I had to sit on a 965, and because of the timing of our wedding and honeymoon, I couldn't make another local event, and so I came in second that year overall. And don't get me wrong, best decision of my life. Absolutely did not. It was
no pain. No, David, no pain.
The local event, but
no pain, no
gain. It kind of hurt.
No pain, no gain, buddy.
Yep.
I see that Paul Brown won that year. Mr. I will travel to Colorado and beat some of you guys.
Yep, and he drove great. Yeah, he drove great. He won fair and square.
All right, now I want to test your memory again. Do you remember emailing me after a pro solo? Any advice?
No.
All right, I came out from a California pro solo in Type R, and I happened to win, I think, by 1.8 seconds. Ring any bells?
No, I'm drawing a complete blank.
So I had not done well in a challenge yet. And your email was very succinct. Have you ever heard... Or no, it was start off with, why did you win by 1.8 seconds? Was the first email. And I think I replied like, well, I don't know. That's how much I won by. Chime in if you know where this is going eventually.
No idea.
The next email you said, have you ever heard of sandbagging? And that was the end of that email. And I'm thinking...
Oh, okay. Now
I had no clue.
Oh.
I did not. And what really you explained to me there, and tell me if you add to this, obviously, was that in challenges, you don't try to go faster. You need to be able to do the same thing over and over again. That advice was good, partially that year, because then I won the next pro solo overall challenge, and then bad because I went to the end of the year event and tried to sandbag and hit cones and didn't even make it. So I threw away a class championship because I was trying to sandbag so much.
Ouch, that was bad advice.
Well, it was pretty good because I won my first overall challenge. And I really learned because I feel like I'd made every mistake possible in pro solos. But I had not yet put together, which I tell everybody I see, any fast drivers, that especially when they say they don't do well in challenges, I'm like, well, don't try to go faster. Because that's what you basically explained to me, is in the challenge, don't try to go faster, and can you repeat what you did? And honestly, I couldn't, usually, or the combination of trying to go faster. So that, I've gone back and forth on now just trying to win my classes again, and can I be crazy and hit cones and make something stick? But for the longest time, that advice at least cleared up a big fog in my brain about why are these challenges so hard?
Well, you took that advice better than me because I never won a pro solo challenge. I won a match tour in 2012 or 2013, but never won a pro challenge. Got to the final 2 once, but then had the tires. I had wrong revs or something, or let the clutch out wrong. Tires hooked, and I red lit in the final round.
That's the thing is, I actually got to see Kevin Youngers. He won maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I was there. One of the happiest moments of my life in autocross was seeing him win after I don't know how many years of doing that. He won the overall challenge. I just don't. So I hope someday we'll get you back out there in the challenges and at the pros. And
So with the pros, how addicted to those were you since you did so many of them? Is that still like a highlight if you had the time you'd get to them?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And after I got married in 2003, in 2004, Tammy was co-driving with me, and we were going to the out-of-town events, making the pros. And actually, that's Tammy's favorite type of event is the Pro Solo. She loves the drag race start and just that extra little adrenaline. And also, I think, enjoyed the a little bit shorter course, a little bit easier to remember, so not as much of a focus, because she was pretty new in autocross, so getting the full, long solo course in her head was a little more difficult, as it is for everyone when they're starting out. So yeah, I love Pro Solos, and I had plenty of success at Pro Solo, but the traveling, once we were expecting our first child, Zach, in 2005, and Tammy couldn't drive anymore, and it just got to be a little more difficult. I still ran 2 pros in 2005 and 2006, and I think I actually won both of those championships, both of those year-end class championships as well. So I was driving enough to get the minimum, but then just logistics of having a family, just it necessitated a change to my priorities, and I value my time with my family far, far above autocross. So it just it's a different stage in life. Sure, I'd love to get back to it sometime. Maybe when our kids are older. They're in 7th, 5th, and 3rd grade right now. So, I'm enjoying the family time and thankfully being able to make enough time to do some autocrossing and spend time with a good friend like Barry, who's been very generous with his car, and get to see my autocross friends a couple times a year. So, yeah, I'd like to get back to it someday, but that won't be for a while, I'm sure.
Oh, come on. Be brave and drag the kids into all this. Get some karts. That terrifies me, honestly, to have the kids out there with me. I want to have them do it, but I'm like, oh, my goodness, how will I get anything with my stuff done? That'll be for sure when I'm in a street car, I guess, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to hear about front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive. You made a transition at some point here.
Yeah, I was definitely an adherent to front-wheel drive is awesome for many years. And particularly the Type R. I still believe the Type R was an amazing handling car, regardless of whether you're looking at front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. But that said, I have to admit, I believe rear-wheel drive is better and more fun. And I know that will offend many people, but it's the feeling of driving the car with the throttle and being able to find just that perfect slip angle under power that you didn't have to find that perfect slip angle by doing a lift or trail braking in. I just don't get it with the front-wheel drive anymore. Now, I will say the way the Type R was handling back in 2001 that I mentioned before, that was pretty special. And I'm sure in prepared class where you can do some pretty amazing things to making a front-wheel drive car handle, I'm sure there's some of that magic that you can get there too. But yeah, I got to say rear-wheel drive. And what's even worse is Barry's C-Mod car has pretty much, it feels like it's really ruined me for everything else, because the connection is so amazing with manual steering, manual brakes. in the center of the car, just does everything right. To be honest, I don't know if I could go back. And to give credit to front-wheel drive drivers, I don't think I could go back and be as fast, because it's a very special skill set, I believe, to get the most out of a front-wheel drive car. That takes a lot of skill, and it's a skill that doesn't translate, I think, 100% when you're coming from rear-wheel drive. I think front-wheel drive drivers going to rear-wheel drive are going to tend to have an easier time transitioning over than rear-wheel drive drivers going and figuring out that special magic to make a front-wheel drive car dance. So credit to when people can make a front-wheel drive car really successful, because it is a very special skill.
Interesting. And in the C-Mod car, are you left foot braking?
No.
Gosh.
I tried braking. I tried it a couple times over the years, and I can't do it. I drive with the throttle too much. I do my sets, so like in a slalom, I'm balancing the car with the throttle. I'm not the type that can trail in with the left foot and settle the back into the car. And there's a couple times where it's a detriment, because like in decreasing radius corners, there are times that, I probably would be a little faster if I could trail in the brake and settle the rear with the left foot brake, but I just can't do it. I'm still right foot braking, and the funny thing about that is on the street in daily drivers, if it's an automatic, I exclusively left foot brake. But I just can't do it in a race car.
And I've got to tell you, when you drove I guess it was one of my Integras, watching your right foot go between the brake and gas was unbelievable, how quick your foot would go back and forth. And I'm not sure if even in the slaloms you would do that, but I remember your foot going bing, 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 like back and forth, back and forth. It kind of boggled my mind, because since I was always left foot braking at that point, I was like, oh my goodness, he's moving his foot really fast in a whole bunch there. So I don't remember if you, like Tanel, would tap in the slaloms, but your foot was active. And the other thing I really remember is how close you set to the steering wheel, it seemed like. I felt like if there was a plate there, you'd be eating off of it. And how you would hold the wheel, and it's like you were always just kind of like, I want to say moving the wheel back and forth, just a little bit amount. In my mind, trying to find more grip. I'm not sure if I asked you that at the time, but you were like always in a big sweeper, just moving the wheel just a little bit. Is that mental to you? Do you know you're doing that, or is that just something that you don't even think about that you do?
No, that's absolutely a conscious effort, and it goes straight back to what we talked about earlier about staying on the edge of the friction circle. The edge of that friction circle is not. I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's a point I'd want to make. Is the edge of the friction circle is dynamic. It throughout any corner, the edge of the friction circle is never the same. And if you're not doing something to be testing the limits of adhesion and the limits of what you can do, whether that's slight variations of the throttle, or whether that's adjusting your slip angle with the steering wheel a little bit, if you're not constantly testing that limit of adhesion, I submit that you're not at the edge of the friction circle. You might be close, but the surface changes throughout that corner. The amount of rubber laid down changes throughout the corner. The radius of where you want to be on your line changes throughout the corner. So you've got to constantly be making some adjustments. And the way I like to, when I've taught schools, the way I like to let people experience what I'm trying to get across there is go around a skid pad. And it's not, in theory, if you have a perfectly flat skid pad, you're going to find a certain turn, angle of the steering wheel and a certain amount of throttle, and you're going to stay constant. But we all know that's not true. You're constantly having to adjust in order to stay on your line in a skid pad. So why wouldn't you do that everywhere?
This is a golden nugget alert for everybody. I thought I'd come back and redub this. Get ready. Here it is. I don't know if it was because of you and somebody else in my car once that I find myself a lot of events. I'll be in the car and I will start moving the steering wheel just to see, is there more there, is there not more there, or can I adjust the line with the throttle by going, if I can accelerate more and stay on the same line, I'm going too slow. Or what John Ames would say, aim at a cone and accelerate to where your arc gets bigger so you miss hitting it. So what you're saying is amazing, that you were doing that on purpose, like you're saying, because it's not the same everywhere. Can I get a little more out of this, or can I get a little bit less? Or that's I'm calling it the golden nugget alert right here. You're the first.
Oh, great.
That's huge. So and I like that you tie it back to the friction circle, that it's not always the same, because none of our turns are the same. We have a bump and we have this, that, and the other in it. So you're making little micro adjustments to see what you can get out of to stay, probably either get back to your line or stay on the line at the maximum speed is what I think of.
Right.
That's good stuff right there. I almost want to take a pause. Everybody take a break, take a sip, rewind a little bit, hit the rewind button, listen again. So any other thoughts in that realm? You gave me inputs for how many times you walked the course and such. So I'm going to tell everybody, go back and listen to that one. I think I went over quite a bit in the Nationals talk of what I guess I'd say some of those fundamental things, and it really does quite often just come back to that epiphany that I had of what worked for me, and maybe this won't work for everybody, but hopefully it'll help somebody, is getting the most out of the car everywhere you can. You can talk to people about what the right line is and what the fast line is, and that's easy advice to get, and it's great advice, and it can make a difference in how successful you're going to be, but that's very objective advice. But you can't really. It's hard to be told how to get the most out of the car at any given moment, and so hopefully, that visualization of the friction circle and that constant. Are you asking yourself the question, am I getting the most out of the car right now? And I almost guarantee you're going to identify several spots where you didn't. I can go back to my 2 fastest runs for Nationals this year, which was good enough for a championship, and I can identify several spots where, I left something out there. And in fact, I've looked at the data on one of the days from Nationals between Barry and myself, and on both of our fast runs, there was a point where he was 0.6 of a second up on me. Cool.
So, I've got areas to improve, as does everyone, right? We're not perfect, and it's amazing that you can have that sort of variation. So Barry was 0.6 up on me, but raw time, we were only 0.1 of a second apart by the finish. So we can both identify now areas that, Barry did way better than I did here, and I did better than him here. Now, as a team, hopefully we will both make changes to rectify our weaknesses and replicate the other's strengths. And hopefully 2018 is a Barry and David 1-2. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, no kidding. And this reminds me, you're talking about that, especially friction circle. You told me that in the Type R, I think it was Type R, maybe it was even back in the Audi day, he's like, you said, if you don't feel the anti-lock brakes and you're not braking hard enough, which has always stuck with me and always has wanted me, I've always wanted power anti-lock brakes if I can have them. Now in the Civic, I've not had them forever, so I've got a little better at the left foot of what I'm doing. But that was huge advice that I tell to so many people. And that's another thing I can tell people, just from driving a local, shoot me, FRS BRZ, one of the twins. The brakes don't grab like I wish they would grab like a Type R. And I just drove an S2000 this weekend, and you talked about getting the shakies. Driving the S2000, a rear-wheel drive car, now it lacks the power, but the first 2 or 3 runs, I got out almost breathing heavy, and like the hands were a little shaky, like, oh, that was fun. Like, and I was on Nexans for the first time, like, these are very controllable. But just having that rear slide out was huge to know that I was at the edge of that friction circle. And the brakes, I'm looking at my notes here when I wrote that down. The braking to me is something that you can look at data, or like you guys are looking at data and can find out if one of you do something better, if you're doing the same things over and over. And to me, so many people give up a lot of time in braking that they should, if they can, get better and better at that. And the other thing I want to point out, you just talked about walking the right line or driving the right line. And I told myself after Nationals this year, after that test and tune, I am going to start pointing out to people when they're walking a line I don't think they can get to. And I did that this last event. I said, there's no way you're going to slow down to get over there, because they were like a car width or 2 wider than I was. I'm just going to tell people that because I have a theory that a lot of people, they don't even walk the right line. Whereas I used to follow you around like, hey, I'm a puppy dog and I should just follow you, because I knew that you guys were fast, so I just tried to copy you. And I can only implore people to do the same. If someone's fast and they're in the same, I think the line's a line pretty much, but I learned a ton by just following you guys. And then I would stopwatch you at Coors Field through the 180s. And David comes through, he looks really slow, well, you were really tight, and you'd be like a second faster than the people that were going deep and going crazy and pushing. Those things really cemented into me, I think, a good foundation of the tight line and how beneficial that was, because you guys were so fast, and at times you didn't look so fast. So that's my throw up of all the good things I picked up from you back here when you were here.
Well, and I'll mention, it's something I mentioned in the Nationals talk too, is I bet it feels really fast to those folks because they are going a higher velocity, but they're just covering a lot more distance. And you're right, it is a lot of people walking the wrong line, because I know Barry and I commented on this many times when we were walking the Nationals this year, where we're walking our line and all of a sudden we look over at the people who are ahead of us and they're walking some line that's about 20 feet wider. Yeah. And just thinking, and not to sound arrogant, but I don't understand why you're out there. Because it's, and I think it is just the fact that it feels faster at times, that people just don't realize or have the opportunity, and it makes me think that's the hard part about autocross is, on a track where you get to go out and do 20 laps and you can try these different things and do multiple sessions and everything on the same course, it's easy to try different things and think, okay, well, I don't think that's going to be faster, but I'll try it, and then see on the stopwatch that it was. We don't have that luxury in autocross, and so it's difficult, I think, sometimes for people to accept the idea that, wait a second, that tight line feels slower. So I don't know if I can accept the idea that that's going to be faster, because it just doesn't feel faster, and they don't have the opportunity to practice that and see that it is faster. So I think it's a great idea to try and spread the news of the tight line is fast.
It seems to be, and I love it was Bob Tennell said that he'd walk a course, and if he was off of the cones in a turn, he'd be like, oh, dang it, John Ames is going to be right there inside of me. And that's where even this last event, I was trying to look at the results real quick to see. My co-driver, he was several seconds slower than me, but looking at Solo Storm, he pulled it back. He said, look, the sweeper right here by us, you're 4/10 slower than me because I'm tighter. And I always know the tighter line's good. I'm like, really? I didn't drive that tight? So next run, I went out there and made sure I attacked that tighter, and off came 4 or 5 tenths. And I swear that's all TrackMate. TrackMate was worth $1,000 because the tight line was always faster. I'm sure at some point it's not somewhere 1 out of 10 times, but
sure,
it just pays for itself. And that's where David White, and I got to thank him for all the coaching and everything he did, mental and everything else, leading up to Nationals at the Test and Tune. He wants me to send the data files and the video. I don't have the data, But to even look at that, like I swear I drove really well. I left Nationals for once feeling very good and not even winning and being okay with that. But if you guys notice how people are learning, they're getting people in their car, they're watching them. How many co-drivers did you have versus data versus video back in the day?
Video, some. I know I had a harness bar in the Type R that I put a camera on, and so I would do a reasonable amount of comparing video. Not a whole lot of co-drivers. Most of my co-drivers that I had were not necessarily as experienced as I was, or not as familiar with the car, and so I was tending to be a pretty good amount ahead of them. Data-wise, I was one of the early adopters of Byron Short's G's Cube, and I did some data on that, but not nearly the level that we have with the tools today. And I know that's something that Barry and I have been really trying to work on the last couple of years, is really taking the time to examine the difference between what he drove and what I drove. And we've got quite a luxury that you've got two drivers, each that have an equal chance of winning a championship. To be able to compare the data between the two of us is a great advantage. And now the data systems that are available, like it's built into the AIM system, the AIM Dash, and that's in Barry's car. All of the data that's available now. Here's a great example: is when Barry and I didn't quite have the success that we had wanted to the last couple of years, we made a concerted effort to pour over the data this last fall, and we identified some areas where Barry was just killing me. He was doing some things far better than I was, and then we identified some areas that I was doing better than him. And we both made concerted mental efforts to talk about and make plans to adjust to try and capitalize on the strengths of the other driver, and emulate what the other person was doing better than ourselves. And just in initial looking at the data from this Nationals, I did some things that I was not as good on last year. The data shows that I'm doing better, and same goes for Barry. He was doing the thing that he was working on. He was doing better, and so we're going to do that again. But it's hard if you don't have a really good driver to compare against. So I feel very very blessed that Barry and I have our runs to compare against each other.
That's something I keep thinking too. I wish I would have done this years ago, is have somebody consistently competitive in my car, to kind of have somebody able to beat you or pushing you the whole time, so that any other event, it's just the same. You're still trying to beat your co-driver as well as help your co-driver.
But that, as you know, that's a really difficult thing to do, and especially as a car owner, to be willing to put someone in that has a good chance of beating you. That's very, very generous, and I'm very thankful that Barry is such a good friend that is willing to do that, and and it shows also the focus that both he and I have is, we want to hang out as good friends and push each other to be our best.
Huge. Yep, huge. That you're not just, I stuck it to you. Don't look at the data. Don't record me, Barry. I just want to have a great car and try to beat you.
Hey, right.
So what's your transition, just so that we all know? Did you go from the Type R to the DSP car?
Yes. And in fact, at the Nationals Awards banquet in 2001, Bob Tunnell came up to me and said, "Hey, we need to talk about you potentially doing a rear-wheel drive project car. And what was funny is that winter then, so Bob and I talked about it quite a bit, and I owe a ton of my success in the DSP BMW to all the years of experience and setup know-how and expertise from Bob and Bimmerhouse. But what's funny is the car I bought and built into my DSP car that I had such success in was Pete Motah's BMW that Neil Sapp ran against me in 2000.
You're like, let me take this car and make it my own. You're going to help me win now.
Yep. So, and that car has definitely been around the block.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite memory that sticks out of all these years of racing?
Yeah, I would say in 2004, when Tammy and I were compete, and it's not one memory. It's a year, and when Tammy and I were competing a lot together and driving together, and it was awesome because I got to take the thing I was most passionate about, and from a hobby standpoint, by far the thing I've always been most passionate about, and still am. And all right, now I get to do that with my best friend, and got to see Tammy progress in her skills, and she was just making leaps and bounds and having a blast. And so that year in 2004, getting to drive with Tammy was really a highlight for me. And and there's all the other things that have been great. Each championship has been really special. That first one, most of all, I'd say. Getting to go back and after having taken a break off from driving, I didn't go to nationals in 2007 and 2008, and then have Ian offer up his 2002 and only get a couple events in the car and be able to go back and have success at nationals is great. The way Tammy's really supported me in my desire to continue to compete at nationals, especially since I don't even live in Colorado anymore, to be able to have her support to go get a little bit of seat time. A couple events a year is what I've been able to do with Barry, but still be able to go to nationals, and which is the first week of school, which makes it that much harder for her taking care of the kids. It's worked out better than I could have hoped for.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to tell everybody, he's one of those guys that can show up after not racing and win, just like Kevin Wenzel came back in the day. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I finally can beat some of these top guys, and this Wenzel guy shows up and starts beating us. And then Chris Dorsey would take time off, it seemed like, and come back. So I've always had in the back of my mind, I hope that I would be able to still have any skills I have by doing it less. Like, would I still be okay? So you're one of the guys I look up to like that. Like, it's amazing. David practiced twice this year, everybody. Watch out. That's kind of I think about it.
I appreciate that, but I will say it's made a lot easier when you've got good friends that have well set up cars that generously offer them to you, so you don't have to drive around a bunch of problems. So that helps a lot.
I'm probably not even my own best friend in that regard. Just putting that out there. Who can help? Who can help? So here's some just of the questions I like to have toward the end of your favorite car out of all these cars that you've driven over all the years.
So my favorite car to drive is definitely the C-Mod car. It's just so raw, and the feedback is so amazing, and it does everything so well. The fact that the data shows we're pulling over 1.7 Gs through corners regularly, it kind of blows other cars away. So that's probably my favorite car to drive. my favorite car that I owned, I think the one that holds the most special spot in my heart is the Type R. You know, I had 2 solo championships and 1 pro championship in that car. So I've won more things in the DSP BMW, and that was a great car as well. But the Type R, just to be able to get into my dream car and have that success in it, I think that one will always hold a very special spot.
You should probably still have one, so if you need one, let me know. I'll find one for you.
I cannot own a Type R again.
Come on.
And for that is because it was such a stressful ownership experience. I frequently had nightmares about that car getting stolen, that once I sold it, my stress levels went down. So I love the car, would love to drive one again, but the ownership experience is just too harsh.
So I was reading on Facebook, I dare went on there again, I try not to be on there too much, about the whole write-up. They drove a whole bunch of D Street cars, or possible D Street cars. The Type R was one. And they're saying as a daily or a track car, the Civic Type R is truly amazing. It's very debatable on autocross. One side of the country can't figure out how to keep it from doing the nannies, and the other side says it's fine. I actually drove through the Honda dealership lot today, but did not stop. So just in case you don't have to be as worried about theft, maybe a Civic Type R with a nice little turbo is in your future.
Yeah, once the kids are grown and driving themselves, I had a Mazda RX-8 for several years, and I finally got rid of that because the whole family couldn't fit in it. And I did just replace it with the exact opposite of all the cars I've had over the years. I've always been, lower horsepower, but great handling, lightweight cars. But I just can't fit the whole family in those sort of cars anymore. So I actually did just buy the car that I'm sure some people are going to shake their heads at me for buying. But it is a fun car. I bought a Dodge Charger Daytona 392, which is, huge V8, just silly amounts of horsepower. But, it's a big, heavy car, but I could fit the whole family in it. And it's actually a fun car to drive on the street. So I actually get to drive it. Since I telecommute, I never got to drive my RX-8 anyways because, I always had to drive the minivan when the family was going somewhere. So now I get to drive a fun car, just not the car I expected that I would buy.
Oh, I thought you were having a V8. I'm like, did he buy that Pontiac with a V8? I was thinking, what did he get? I didn't know this latest one. Okay, here's one. If you could drive anybody's car that you know of out there, you don't have to drive it for the whole season, but if you just had an inkling, anything stand on your radar, or a couple of them?
So anybody's car. I don't know him personally, but I'd love to drive Zach Kiesel's E-Mod car. That would be a really fun one. Just because you see how planted that thing is in how it puts down power. I would think that would just be a real hoot. For people I know, I'd actually love to drive Bob Tennell's E-Mod car, just because that one looks like it would be a blast, and it'd be fun to see how I would fare against Bob in the car. So that would be one. I don't know. I don't know how much. I've gotten to drive so many awesome cars and so many fun cars that I don't think I do as much dreaming about that as I used to when I was younger, and I hadn't driven as many of those cars. I'll throw in Jess Drigger's McLaren, his is it SSM now? His McLaren, because, come on, it's a McLaren. That would be pretty fun.
I took a photo or two of it again this last weekend. I was like, wow, it's amazing. It's out here again. To me, that seems big. It's just like a Camaro seems big. I'm getting ruined also. I keep wanting to go smaller and lighter weight. I'm like, next I'll be paying Barry. Come on, Barry, just let me get in there. Please, just let me see.
Well, you're the right size because it needs a tall, skinny person. So.
See? Barry. And
If you could build, we have an unlimited budget now. I don't know if it'll be the DSP Type R Integra we talked about, but you have an unlimited budget, unlimited time, maybe you fund somebody else to do it. What car would you like to build?
So that is driven entirely by what I would say is my next autocross goal. And that is a prepared car, because my goal in C Modified, obviously I always want to win, as everyone does. That's the goal of the competition. But I'd won in street, in stock class cars, and I'd won in street prepared cars, and I really wanted to prove to myself that I could win in a modified class car. And now that I've done that, I would really love to try and win a championship in a prepared class car. So the goal is, next year, Barry's going to win C-Mod, because that's the same thing he did when he owned a C-Mod car in the past. His co-driver won a championship, Andy Ost, and then the next year, Barry went back and won his championship in the car. So now that's going to happen again. So sports car, you heard it here first. You need to pick Barry Ott to win next year, because, like I mentioned, he was 6 tenths ahead of me at one point on one of those courses. So one mistake is all that made the difference there. So sports car, he needs to be your pick. So I need to get Barry to win next year, and then convince Barry to build a prepared car so that we can go try and tackle a prepared class.
How about CP? Let's have a campaign, you two and CP. I want you to go large in charge.
See, that would be a lot of fun, because there's some great cars that have a lot of development in them and some really good drivers. So that would be a pretty good challenge. I think probably, something in the D prepared, E prepared area would be a lot of fun. Maybe a D prepared MR2. Go race against Steve Holscher again, because I raced against him some back in DSP. That would be fun again.
Still staying small, but I think the CP national winning car might be for sale. Just in case anybody knows, it's a blue Mustang, I believe. You can lose several hundred pounds out of it still.
Well, why don't you go ahead and send that link to Barry?
Exactly, Barry, get busy.
I'm not in the market.
Barry, you can get a couple prepared cars and figure out which one you want to race. I'll help sort them out. Actually, I won't let myself get in big cars. That's a no-no. David, I thank you for all the time. This has been great again.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Do you have any questions you'd want to ask the audience to get feedback on? Like if you had a question of the day to poll the audience, or to ask them something, or ask them what was helpful, or ask them what they're trying to work on. This is something I just came up with from a different podcast. The guy always says, "Hey, ask the question of the day."
You know what? I would love to see a poll of how important people believe a tight line is.
Cool.
And you can have the sort of poll like it's the most important thing. It's very important. It's somewhat important. It's not always, something along those lines. Yep. I'd be really curious what people really think, because, like we were talking about, there's so many people that you see walking a wide line that it makes me think that not everyone thinks it's important. And it'd be really interesting to have that along with the demographic of how many trophies at nationals do you have?
Yes.
And see if there's a correlation there.
And this isn't part of this poll, but a realistic line. I don't think people walk a realistic line. And David Whitener had a good point. He had stepped off at some point. For every 15 feet forward, he could go 1 foot left or right, or 1 foot left or right, at some speed. And he had practiced walking that so he would know how much he could turn.
That's a good idea.
So being realistic, first of all, walking a tight line should be easy. So I always walk, if anything, extremely tight, saying, hey, I would really like to be here. If I screw up and I'm over there, I'm going to try to make an adjustment to get back.
But if anything, I default to a super, even tighter than seems possible. Especially if you look at other people walking, I'm like, oh, maybe I can't get here. But it's always the unrealistic lines people walk where they get to a cone and they just turn right past it. I'm like, you can't do that unless you slow down a whole bunch before that. Like, are you really going to late apex that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So great idea for a poll.
Thanks for listening. For the show notes and contact information, please visit autocrosstalk.com. There you can also subscribe so that we can keep you up to date on new shows as they come out. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe on iTunes for the upcoming shows. You can connect to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autocrosstalk. You can share your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your suggestions there. Also share with your friends. Hopefully you found it entertaining and motivating, and hopefully other people will as well. It's been fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and check back next week for the next show.